Somali diaspora really, they have been the backbone of Somalia and Somali nation since the civil war. They're the one who actually providing in terms of finance to the families, communities affected by the civil war. And they are actually providing in terms of when you look in terms of a Somali diaspora sent back to home, they, almost 3 times more than the whole, international community's donations to Somalia. So you can see that Somali diaspora actually is the lifeline of, you can say, our country. And many of them went back, like, Sister Huda, and you can see, all the regions, Somali diaspora returnees, who actually participating in all kind of different life, is contributing in terms of education, healthcare. As you know, the civil war, destroyed all infrastructure, all the the basic services to the nation, and so the diaspora has actually filled that gap. And whether it is institutions of education, institutions of healthcare, institutions of humanitarian developmental projects, civil societies, entrepreneurial, and I'm so interesting to see Sister Huda as entrepreneur, especially Somali women. They're very entrepreneurial. In general, Somalis are very entrepreneurial, and especially Somali women, and they do help in the country in terms of to survive from the civil war, but also they are part of also rebuilding in terms of political stability, in terms of sessions relating to the humanitarianism, whatever it is, drought, or it is famine, it is disasters, human disaster, or sometimes natural disasters or man-made disasters, like explosion is caused by these terrorist organizations like Al-Shabaab. They're the one who always respond, spontaneously on the spot and supporting our people and our country. Having said that, obviously diaspora, they are also a part of our community. Sometimes they can be also a part of the problem, but they are also part of the solution. And if you look in terms of a political situation currently, and if you look at the current government and the previous governments as well, a majority of politicians and leaders, they are from the diaspora. And sometimes that's why people say sometimes they can't be part of the problem. However, in terms of Somali, when you're talking about Somali sovereignty, Somalis are really very proud people, and they like to defend their country. They like to defend the dignity and the honor of their country, of their people, in general. However, the civil war and the follow-up consequences made the country very fragile, and made the community as well sometimes using this divide and rule that has been somehow influenced. And so the crisis we're seeing today, it's not I can say it's man-made and crisis, and I think it's a lot of Somali become like a lot of resources for a lot of interest. So strategically it's a very interesting place, Somalia. It's Horn of Africa. It's Kuwait is one of the longest beach and seaside in Africa. It has a strategic place when you look, it connects to a lot of different African countries, but also it connects in terms of the Arabian, the Red Sea. We have, also a link there. Somalia had a very, various and historic relationship in terms of Far East and Middle East and in Europe. And so Somalia is situated in very strategic place, which makes it like, interesting, a place that everyone wants to get involved. However, I think Somalia, we can say that obviously international communities have supported Somalia, and we're not ungrateful people. We're grateful, whoever who has, supported us during the need. On the other hand, obviously, we don't want to be used to that support in terms of, Somalia, and dividing, our people, and kind of making, almost impossible Somalia to come together and unite and have dialogue themselves, and establish their own kind of narrative, and establish their own peace building based on their own culture and perspective and traditions. And if you look now, the central government and federal member state, is the way it has been designed itself is disastrous. It just has been designed, Somalia to fail, actually, because when you look, how can you have a country who has 6, 7, 5 presidents? That's impossible. You can't. We have like United States, who is a federal state, but they have one president. All the others are governors. Every governor, obviously, they have their autonomy. They have to govern themselves in autonomy, but then they have central government, which is coming, all of them, under the president. And so when you look at the way the Somalis political a system has been designed, which is far from, I think, from Somali a culture or perspective, or and from their own and kind of systems and traditions that they used to use, is not working. We can see it's not working, even though it could have been some sort of and solution in terms of having some sort of autonomy in Somali regions that gives them the ownership in terms of to build and to govern and to have the voices in that specific regions. You cannot have 6 presidents in one country, and that I think is the crisis we're having. And so Somali diaspora has a role in terms of supporting, like, if I take an example, the Global Somali Diaspora, we had our international conference on actually end of October this year, and the themes were trust and self-reliance, and the reason we have chosen that was we have seen in terms of what civil war has done to us, basically, but also what the current situation is doing to us, and Somalis has been divided more and more and more, and so how can we use our own culture and tradition and systems, but also take advantage in terms of the modern political systems that can reconcile within our own traditions and laws and rules, because before Western came to us, and before the colony, we had our own way of living. We had our own systems in place. If there's conflict, we have our own way of solving without having outside interference. And so it seems that now is everyone's business in terms of Somalia, and we have been stretched in so many different directions in different ways, and so it's quite very important, Somalis to really wake up and see in terms of where we're heading to, and Somali diaspora can play a great role, and still I think they are playing, even though they can be both sides, as I mentioned, because I'm not naive, and I'm not saying like Somali diaspora they smooth and they haven't done anything wrong, but Somali diaspora is part of the Somali society, and sometimes when there is this division, especially the clan system, people are so sensitive and to go into different directions. But I think the key thing is about how can we bring back our sovereignty? How can we bring back our own ways of solving our conflicts, without relying others, and we need to understand that And, you know, those who are supporting us, international communities who are supporting us, we don't want to make that support condition of to go their own ways. No, if that support is actually conditioned on in terms of to, you know, govern or, you know, jeopardize Somali sovereignty, then we shouldn't be accepting that kind of support. Actually, you know, if they want to support Somalia, they have to support in a neutral way, and they shouldn't be part of you know, the conflict. And so Somalis need to solve their own problems. Somalis need to come together and sit on the table and talk and have dialogue, instead of you know, having this, you know, threats and clans, you know, militia and all kind of stuff. In the past, the Somalis used to come and sit, you know, under the tree, and you know, our elders or people, they used to come and sit and talk when there's conflict. And we had our own way of traditions of solving, and we need to go back our roots. We need to, you know, realize, you know, our heritage. We need to utilize our resources, and there's so many, you know, that uniting us than dividing us, and we shouldn't be accepting, you know, those who are coming and trying to, you know, choose sides, and in order to, you know, make the situation more, you know, fragile and more, you know, volatile. Talking about the approachment of Horn of Africa, I think in principle, I think having collaborative, you know, and you know, some sort of platform and alliance within the Horn of Africa, I think is a good thing. And when you look, like, for example, Europe, when you look, you know, how many countries, you're talking about 27 countries who making, you know, and forging, you know, a collaborative approach, because they have actually realized that they need each other, and they do need to, you know, share and utilize resources and expertise and support each other. And I think it could be like a kind of a dream, isn't it? Like African Union, you know, we have established, you know, years and years, decades back, African Union. We should have actually filled that role in terms of to make, you know, African countries and more, you know, bringing together, more, you know, collaborative, more kind of having, you know, kind of you know, trade and investment and economically in between them, you know, working together. And I think that some, you know, to a certain extent has not been succeeded. And you know, so one can, for example, argue whether that, you know, reasons lies with African themselves, or sometimes lies also with foreigners as well. And that, you know, Africa has been, you know, obviously with, you know, colony and also, you know, these, you know, borders that has been, you know, designed to Africa, you know, have always conflicts between themselves and not actually seeing themselves as, you know, an entity, as a African continent, and so on and so on. So there is a lot of root causes that you can, you know, actually, you know, see an examples. But I think in terms of, as Dr. Samuel, you know, mentioned, in terms of Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia, like if you look in the past, you know, even a couple of years ago, it was kind of impossible to think of this kind of format. And I think the more people come together and collaborate and work together, the, you know, the more it's better. And it's the same in a country like we're talking about now, Somalia. And if Somali people come together and work together and collaborate in common interest, the more they actually progress, the more they reach their goals, the more they can actually thrive, and so on. And it's similar. So always, you know, coming together and working together has more, you know, benefits. And of course, there is always challenges. There's always these barriers and things that need to be overcome. But and at the same time, I think Dr. Samuel has a couple of times mentioned, you know, Kenya, because I am mindful at the moment, because, you know, we have some sort of, you know, maritime dispute and issues between Somalia and Kenya, and I think it currently is not, you know, thinkable to have that kind of collaborative. Obviously, in the future, it could be things always change. It's similar like Ethiopia, a couple of years ago, and so on. And so I think, Africa, if they can have more collaborative approach, countries can thrive, can benefit their society if they even open the borders to have. But that also requires the capacity and governance and a lot of things to be developed. If I come back in terms of the Western kind of interference, and it's true, if we say here, isn't it, there's no such a free lunch. and anyone who gives you something, obviously they want something back, and that is a natural, that is human and kind of mindset. However, we have to look, what kind of strings are touched in terms of the support we're getting. If that's, is about, at the expenses of our sovereignty, if it's about expenses of our dignity, it's about at the expenses of our own, honor, then why should we accept that? And we shouldn't. And that's why we should be negotiating. And sometimes, people say like, if you actually, you're beggar, you can't have much choices, you can't choose it. and a country like Somalia that has been suffering, for the last, decades, in a civil war and from one disaster to another, I can understand that the country needs to stand on its feet. And as Dr. Samuel, mentioned, it's a reality that need to be addressed, and one cannot, do that. It's by itself. It needs the other support. But it has to. I think Somalia has to choose their friends very carefully, and those that the genuine friends and those who want to support. And that's why I think I liked it that the Dr. Samuel mentioned Turkey, which I think has brought to the Horn of Africa totally different dynamic, different kind of and way of in addressing and supporting intervention, different way of intervention that actually provides and harness the country's sovereignty, the country's nation and stability, which reflecting in terms of what country needs. Like like for example, when our agriculture, they are actually, for example, at the time of harvest, if US produce brings for example, and all these and maize kind of donation, and that actually brings that means that our farmers are not able to sell their products. That is actually destabilizing our agriculture, our farmers, and so on. And so it has to be the support we need, it has to be the one we needed, and Somalia should be able to negotiate and not actually sell their for example and honor and dignity in at the expenses of getting some sort of support. And so that's why I'm saying that we need to reflect in terms of the international communities. It's time they review, and I think very quickly Dr. Samuel gave examples in terms of the intervention in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya. What's happening and what what kind of aftermath these countries are actually struggling, and so on. And are we learning from that, or are we just for example blindly following in terms of whatever kind of intervention that has been brought to to us, and therefore it requires a decision that sometimes is very, very difficult to take, and you obviously have to sometimes face the consequences in maybe short term, but I think in the long term, Somalia would be well off if they themselves return to themselves and Somalia is a very, very rich country. And when you look in terms of, the Somali maritime, when you look at smart resources, the agriculture, the livestock, fishery, we are very rich. But in terms of, we're not utilizing our resources. We're not actually, the country is very big. Everyone can, have, a huge space in the country. There's no need to fight for land or deed. And so I think in terms of the situation of Somalia, obviously, is not as simple. It's very complex, and it's very, dynamic, and it's evolving. And but at the same time, I feel if there's, we say where there's will, there's always way. If Somalis wake up and even if we have a few Somali people who who unite and the honesty and in terms of their vision and have vision, they can win. The Somalis who fought for the independence, there was a lot of obviously struggle, but the latest the end, this Somali we call SYL, the Somali Youth League. There were 13 of Somali youth, and so and who actually and won the struggle of colonialism. So I think it's quite important, recognize the challenges that we're facing, the political one, the economic one, the humanitarian one, the infrastructure, the capacity, and B is what in terms of what the solution of Somalis lies in terms of with the current political. When you look back at the previous administration, as brother Ismail mentioned, is that how many prime ministers did President Hassan Sheikh change it? He had a conflict with, and so it is about in terms of president appointing prime minister, and then they have conflict and changing another one, and it's a part of, it is part of growing, and it's part of actually creating some sort of understanding about the democratic rule of law, but also furthering understanding and a common interest of Somalis themselves. And so I think, and I see IGAD and African Union has have both role to play in terms of and bringing a more collaborative approach and through Africa solution. But the limitation also it's there, because the Western resource and funds has also influence on them as well, because African Union and IGAD also and they partially, or if not all, funded also by Western donors. So it is how economically I think economically can you overcome in terms of this dependency, and I think to overcome dependency requires, and especially Somalis or Horn of Africa, and to work together. If you want to become self-reliant, you need to work together. And in order to work together, you need to create that trust, because that trust within Somalis, as has been mentioned, and Brother Ismail, the civil war has damaged our trust within ourselves. And I think again the Horn of Africa as well, there is historic conflicts that has been also damaging years and years and years. So you need to gradually build that trust between the community, between the countries, Horn of Africa countries, in order to create that collaborative approach, because one cannot be self-reliant unless you collaborate with others. And in order to collaborate together, you need that trust to create that trust. So it's quite very interesting, and I think it's very complex, and there's no simple answer to address it. So I think it's quite interesting in terms of when you look at Somali, the national unity or clan system, and I think they interlinked. I don't think you can differentiate, because obviously it's a reality that we are, you know, it's our heritage. We came from different clans, and the issue is, I think, you know, it's not a problem to belong to certain clans, because that is, you know, our, you know, heritage. That's where we belong to. That is our, you know, great fathers, you know, ancestors, and so on. The issue is when, you know, this is used to harm others. So that is the problem. And you know, in you know, obviously as a faith, we Muslim, and you know, it's clearly states that we use, you know, a different clan system to recognize each other, you know. And I always said, in terms of myself, Somalis, because obviously, you know, if you look like, you know, Nigeria, like countries who have, you know, speaking, you know, so many, you know, hundreds of different languages, and, you know, different tribes and different, you know, cultures. And Somalia, we have, you know, the privilege, and you know, to have that, you know, language and culture and religion that all, you know, actually and are the same. We may have our differences, but in terms of Somalis marry each other, majority of them, they intermarry, they you know. So I always said, actually, Somalis are extended families. I wouldn't say, you know, because if you talk to someone from Somalia and, you know, ask their ancestors, at some point you're going to be connected, you know, to that person, because either your grandfather or grandmother or your auntie or your uncle, or, you know, you related to somewhere. So that's why I always said, you know, Somalis are connected. They are, you know, extended families. And the problem comes when that, you know, clan system is used in a way that actually harms other, instead of bringing the resources. They, you know, like in the past, people used to, you know, share resources to support each other, and of course sometimes creates conflicts. But I think if you want Somalis to have that national unity, approaching through, you know, and from my, you know, understanding and my, you know, views is, you know, we need to, you know, promote this mindset in terms of, you know, you can be, you know, whoever you are in terms of clan system or any region or wherever you come from, but at the end of the day, you are Somali. You're Somali, and that's what connects us to us. And we have that common interest. You know, all of us, we love our country, we love our people, and no matter what's happening now, if someone sees, you know, Somalis who are, for example, struggling, it doesn't matter where clan they come from or which region they come, they're going to go and support them. And so that is our culture, that's our heritage. And even, you know, when the most difficulties and civil war was happening, people still were, you know, interclan support, you know, supporting each other and saving each other, you know, neighbors saving each other, you know, relative, you know, saving each other. So we are interconnected. And I think, you know, using that kind of positive side, I think, you know, clan and Somali unity can be made, you know, hand in hand, without saying, oh, don't use a clan system, just we use, you know, national unity, which actually sometimes can, you know, create it's itself an issue, because you're trying to ignore or, you know, and suppress some sort of heritage of the people. And so we need to, and, you know, enhance and promote the positive side of our clan system, and, you know, eliminate, you know, those that, you know, that are creating the harmful, you know, narrative and harmfulness. I will add, in terms of what I already said, in terms of, initially you were saying, Mahlet, yourself, like, you know, when you repeat, you know, in terms of the propaganda, in terms of the fake news, or did that, people at the end, you know, start to you know, taking in, isn't it, and also thinking it's true. And so I think, you know, it's about one side is how that, you know, mentioned in terms of awareness raising. For me, it's about changing the mindset of our citizens, you know, in terms of what the Somali citizens or citizens in the whole. So I will say two, for example. First, you know, the Somali citizens, you know, in terms of is the clan system, you know, bigger and more important than your, you know, national, you know, citizenship. And I think, you know, as a Somalis, sometimes, you know, the citizenship, you know, being a Somali, you know, is not something that has been, I think, in terms of promoted enough to, you know, make that, you know, people are more in terms of, and aware and also more conscious and giving more, and weight and value in terms of, as Dr. Samuel said, Somali Nimo, which is, I think, the most important element here. And I think that is, sometimes what is lacking, and especially those, young people, the youth, in our country, we said, over 70% is, and the population is a young generation, and many of them, haven't, grown up in terms of stable and political sustainable, environment. And so their reference, like, for example, their reference is just, destruction and civil war and, warlords, and that's what they have, able to reference. While, like, my generation, who had opportunity to grow up in Somalia, Mogadishu, educated there, I had, opportunity to being lecturer in Mogadishu University, and take my early, years in my country. I have different reference in terms, because I know what, like, nationhood is. What is, for example, my mother's, participated in what we used to call, iska wax u qabso, which is like, is actually, do for yourself in terms of, Somalis were doing a lot of volunteering after their work, to build, the schools, to build, a lot of, and projects and developmental projects. And so, we know, like, for example, what nationhood means. While, I think a lot of young generation, unfortunately, they don't have that reference. And so on, how can we create, the importance and the sweetness of nationhood, and how can we bring back the Somali Nimo? I think that's the key, and I think we have to utilize the technology to use that, and this kind of platform, I think, is so one of them, bringing people together to actually discuss. And when we talk, then you have solutions. It's always like that, when you talk, then you find also solutions as well. When you discuss the challenge, you will be able to creatively identify the solutions. And I think in terms of the Horn of Africa, as well as, post the colonial era, there was a lot of divisions within the African continent, and also that conflicts and hate that has been created, and then had imprinted in people's, a lot of people's kind of mind. And so it's time we change. It's time we need to change that narrative and change into a positive, and we call Somali Walal Nimo, Dr. Samuel, which is the brotherhood, sisterhood. So create that, across the whole of Africa, and again, we can use, the technology to, and create that awareness and change the mindset and attitude of people, because when people see the positive, it's more likely they're going to follow. And I also echo with Dr. Samuel in terms of, maybe let's take, this further, and maybe create, a platform where we have more informal chat, maybe we have more creating and add up, more friends and families, and create that more, and a bigger kind of platform that actually connected to that common goal, connected to that, common interest in the Horn, because, we have common interest. And I think, what unites us, more than one actually, and dividing us. I remember, when I was studying in France, and there was that time, actually, you look for any, you look any black person, you look any, because when you experience the racism, you experience the isolation as a black person, any person you see in the far that is a black is becoming like, your brother, your sister. And so, and what important it is in terms of having such, kind of what means being black in the West. How important it is to unite, because you have experienced racism, you have experienced being isolated or being disadvantaged because of your color, because of your background, because of where you come from, and so on. And we have African continent, which is the most richest continent in the world, that everyone is competing in the world, yet we are the poorest in the world. So I think we're not naive. We know the complexity and challenges, but I think we can overcome if we, perseverance, determination, and consistency, continue, our dialogue, our understanding, our, and kind of looking forward in terms of how can we improve the livelihood of our nations. I think that's the most important. That's a common goal that can unite us. And Mahlet, thank you very much for creating such wonderful platform tonight and inviting us to have this meaningful discussion. Thank you.